you know, if you look at what's been going on, I mean, I've been banging on about how post 2021 it's been a difficult ask for Lewis Hamilton to sort of elbows out going into the first corner alongside Yuki Tsunoda and Alex Albon, rather than, you know, dicing with Max at the front of the race. And I think he's done pretty well. I think there's a different thing for Charles, and that has been constant frustration with strategy, constant frustration with the car not being right up there with a Red Bull. And he's at Ferrari, where things are really political anyway, and very difficult to change things and get them moved around. I think Charles pushed very hard to get Freddie Vasseur. I would be surprised if that isn't the case. And I think he's probably feeling that, you know, first 13 races now underway in 2023, things are starting to go a little bit better. It's a cliche in Formula One. It takes a long time to undo the work of the predecessor. But I think in Ferrari's case, it probably does, because it's Ferrari got another problem, unique to Ferrari really, compared with certainly the British-based teams, and that is it's very difficult to get people to work for Ferrari these days, partly because of Brexit and everything else that came with that, and partly because today there are so many contractual restraints preventing them from doing that. The teams are very, very protective. It's very difficult to get them to go to work for Ferrari now. And I think there's still a little bit of nervousness in the whole Formula One world about the way Ferrari sacked James Allison. You know, as good as James Allison still is, Ferrari sacked him. There was a time, at the time, of course, he was going through a lot of personal agony with the passing away of his wife, but it was a reality that Ferrari actually did sack him. And I think that's kind of scared a lot of good English, British-based engineers into going there. So that's the first problem. Getting good people to go to Ferrari is not easy. Let's fly around here. I'll do an AJ Foyt and grab it, my peripheral vision. So that's one thing. And I think, yeah, I do think the momentum's starting to go the right way for Charles, and that result would not have hurt him at all. Yeah, it's been a really tough first 13 races, isn't it? When you think about Miami going off twice at the same corner, consecutive days. And I was thinking about this, actually just a couple of days ago, and I think, you know, it's quite an unusual situation in modern Formula One to have a guy that was out there winning races and not that far away from really having a decent look at the championship and looking like, you know, the big star of the future. And then it's all kind of taken away from him. And every race now, it's touch and go whether he's going to have a car that'll get him on the podium. And I think it's, you know, Charles, when you look at it now with the hindsight of the August break already and being able to sit in the sun a bit and just think about things, it's a relatively easy situation for Carlos Sainz, because all he needs to do and wants to do and will do, if he can, is beat Charles Leclerc. That's a very simple goal that he has, and he's been doing quite well with that. You know, he's been driving quite well, finding his own limit and his own rhythm and doing that. For Charles Leclerc, it's a different thing. You know, all he wants to do is go out and beat Max Verstappen, and if he can't beat Max Verstappen, he wants to at least get a pole, knowing that the car's probably not going to be very good on race day. And so he does make a lot of mistakes, and so I'm beginning to sympathise more with him and what happened, say, in Miami than I did at the time, when I thought, how can a guy do that? You know, I'm a guy, I have to confess, I'm a guy that was reared on Nigel Mansell's approach to racing, because we were like brothers for a long time. We're still very good friends, but we were like brothers for a long time. And for those 5 years in Formula One, when he was in uncompetitive cars and not winning, I was very close to him. We probably spoke every day, probably after every session and every race. And I grew up with those 5 years knowing that Nigel would always be absolutely spot on. Yeah, he would make the odd mistake, but he would be spot on in terms of getting the best from the car, and in a very, very professional way, consistent way too. Nobody was watching, nobody took any notice, because it was usually for 13th place or 11th place in the Lotus or whatever it was, or the active ride had collapsed yet again in the Lotus. And, you know, he was nowhere. But when he got to Williams, it was a different story. So when Nigel, it was the opposite. You know, Nigel had no winning at all. And then suddenly he was at Williams and things started to gather momentum. And then he was in a very good car, and then he started to win. And when the winning opportunity came, it was easy for him, because it was, you know, the big points weren't the big points anymore. He'd gone through all that, and just having a nice car, it was like, ugh. For Charles, it's the opposite. It's the exact opposite. You know, he came in, okay, first year, and then he started winning at Ferrari. And then it's all gone away from him. It's a very difficult thing, that. Very difficult. And I think, in answer to your question, I think things are starting to go in his direction. And Andrea Stella getting all his mates to McLaren now, and that's fair enough. Things are changing. But Ferrari need to get good people now to replace them and to do the job. And that's the biggest problem they face, in my view. So it's not just a question, is Charles now more confident and does he have momentum to get some more results like this? It depends on the car, quite obviously. But, actually going back to Miami, he did have a slight chance of getting the pole in Miami, and there were other races where he's been quick. And let's hope, Ferrari have got... they've done reasonably well, I guess, with the last couple of upgrades, unlike Aston, for example, who seem to have gone backwards a little bit. McLaren obviously have taken the biggest step forwards. So long answer to a good question. Thank you very much indeed, Alessandra.